Hey, good morning. Welcome to Sports Talk, Friday, April 11th. I'm your host, Chris Raynor. Our really big shoe, as Ed Sullivan used to say, that's really taking us back a day or two. Got Eddie Southards and Robert Holland as our guests today. Legendary sports writers. They don't like to hear this. Every time I say it, they laugh at me when I've been talking to them. But legendary sports writers here in Onslow County, man, you guys wrote a ton of copy. How about me knowing the term there? A ton of copy over the years, didn't you?
Yes, plenty.
Well, we're going to get into that and the heyday of the daily news and the sports page and everything. We do want to thank our sponsors before we get started good. National Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram, Rock Creek Golf and Country Club, Jones LP Gas located there in Verona, Golden Corral, Mr. Billy Sewell, Management Center, Barnes Diamond Gallery, Bartley Insurance Services, Bill Mercer, Onslow County Motor Company, Ben Beasley in the gang, Humphrey Heating and Air Conditioning, Lane Associates Family Dentistry, Drs. Tommy and Kim Morgan, Jones Onslow EMC, your Touchtone Energy Cooperative, and Southern Touch Painting, Roger Carroll and his crowd. Also want to special thanks. You guys have the y'all got here early, so we got started on the Billy Bowls early today. Special thanks to Helen's Kitchen and Billy Grissett for feeding our Sports Talk show and guests. What'd you guys think of those Billy Bowls?
Excellent.
Yes,
they're great.
And we're going to start a new tradition. We're eating first thing because those, when they're hot, man, they're always good. But when we wait sometimes an hour and a half for me to stop talking, yeah, they're not quite as hot as when he got them here. They were excellent today. Thank you, Billy, and your staff there at Helen's Kitchen. Our Hurricane Watch is powered by Downey's Heating and Air Conditioning. Jason Humphrey in the gang. Kind of a weak hurricane watch this. It was more like wasn't even a tropical storm watch this week, but we'll talk about that more coming up. Our Racing Report is powered by Onslow County Motor Company, Ben Beasley in the gang, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You guys do much stuff on YouTube, watching old videos, stuff like that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, wave to the YouTube and Facebook world. They're out there right now. Our YouTube channel is at WSME Radio. You can catch the show on our Facebook page at Freedom 97.1 WSME, and you can find all of your favorite on-demand sports talk podcasts and stream the station live at our website on WSME971.com. And it's interesting that because when I tried to get some photos of you guys for the Facebook promo and everything, it popped up your podcast you did from where you did with Coach Padgett years ago. How long ago roughly was that? 2-3 years ago? About 3 years ago?
Yeah, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And you guys, I didn't know you had done the same show together before.
Yes.
So a lot's changed in 3 years. Unfortunately, Coach Padgett isn't with us anymore. He did a great job with his show getting it started, and he was just a great person. First of all, he knew just about everything on the Onslow County landscape. He was probably right there with you guys as far as his sports knowledge, but he was really good at getting guests that could just get on here and talk.
Yes, he was. And I tell you, it's still hard to imagine that he's not around because, like I was telling you before, I remember him from his days in high school.
Oh, yeah.
When I first started with the newspaper.
And such a young man when he passed, unfortunately. We all miss him, of course. He was my coach in high school, one of our coaches. He wasn't our varsity coach at the time. Coach Ed Wall was, which I'm sure you guys remember writing about. But, yeah, Coach he is missed. And we all, if you ever get a chance, go back and look at some of those old shows because they're pretty cool. Just the conversations and the guests he had. All right, Eddie, you got your day because I was sitting at the golf course Wednesday out at Bear Trail, and Eddie was sitting there, and we were watching some of the pre-Masters coverage on the TV, and we get to talking, and I said, yeah, man, I would love to go there one time. He said, well, I covered it, a few years back, or, a few times, And I said, really? And I said, well, what'd you cover it for? He said, the Daily News. And I said, what's your name? And when he told me his name, man, all the memories come flooding back. I remember seeing so many of those articles with you guys' names on it. Let's jump right into the Masters thing. It's, it started up this week. What years did you cover the Masters?
I think the first year, I actually didn't cover the Masters when I worked for the Daily News. I was working for the Fayetteville Observer. 1999 was the first one I went to, I recall, or 98 it was. And I think Vijay Singh might have won that year.
Okay.
I can't remember. No, it's Marco Mira. Marco Mira won that year.
Did you hang out with any of the big dogs, any?
We got to interview everybody, but it was in a group setting, press conferences.
That's awesome.
But yeah, everybody was there. You kind of went from Jack Nicklaus to Arnold Palmer to Tiger Woods.
Right.
It was like.
So that was kind of the passing of the baton between those three. Yeah.
It was passing of the baton, exactly.
Now, did you start with the Fayetteville Observer before the Daily News, or after? You were after with it,
After,
right?
yeah. I worked 20-something years at the Fayetteville Observer, and that's when I retired.
Well, let's get the timelines down first. What year did you start with the Daily News?
74.
1974.
51 years ago.
A lot going on in Onslow County back then, wasn't it?
It was something else.
And you guys were, mostly, you guys did mostly sports, right? Or did you do some other new stuff too?
I just did sports, and Robert was kind of a part-time sports writer. He worked at the paper, but he was more back in the
In the production room.
What year did you start there, Robert?
About a year before Eddie got there.
So 73, roughly. What year was Marcus Schrader? Were those terrible crimes with that? Was that after you were with the paper? Like,
No, I was with the paper at the time because I remember when the story broke. And the news
those were
went on.
some big stories back then that you guys had to cover. Just terrible, terrible acts that man did, and just that was one of the big '70s news stories, obviously in Onslow County.
And I think it was more than one bank that he
It was,
wound up.
terrible, and unfortunately, more than one person that. Anyway, this a bad time in Onslow County, and hopefully that's in everybody's rearview mirror. You guys were both mainly sports writers, all right?
Yeah.
So you started in '73. When did you become a full-time sports writer?
Well, I took my first full-time job. I went to Rocky Mount. And when it was be about 77, 78. And then when they added a person to the Daily News Sports, Eddie gave me a call and got me a chance to come back.
Wow.
So
And,
that's when
and the rest is history, as they say.
or
Now,
for better or worse.
Speaking of news, we have a press release from this week. Yesterday, Thursday, they had the groundbreaking for our new YMCA here, the New River YMCA. That's going to be a big deal there on Gum Branch Road. Billy Sewell with Golden Corral was one of the big front runners in that to help bring that to the area and get everybody on board. Have you guys followed that story much as far as what it's going to mean to the area?
I think it's a great improvement, and it's been something that's been talked about over the years, but it's never come to fruition.
Yeah. Fruition, that's a newspaper word, right, everybody?
Spell check that.
You got a lot of the areas, and probably when you were in Fayetteville, maybe that had like swim teams for high schools and stuff. We can't do that here because who has a pool in their high school?
Lejeune used to have a
I'm sure
swim
they.
team.
Yeah, Lejeune has some facilities available.
Yeah.
But locally, though, this will mean, from what I understand, talking about it last week or a couple weeks ago, we're talking about it on the show. This will mean that the local high schools can have swim teams and do all their meets there.
That'll be interesting.
Now there'll be no home court. No, I'm not home court. Home pool advantage, I guess. But it'll be neat to be able to have to do that. Now,
Home water.
you guys have covered stuff and been around the landscape here a long time. Billy Sewell has been a lot to Onslow County. The stuff he does, Golden Corral. You hardly go to a sporting events, the East Coast Invitational, or any of them without a Golden Corral banner because he's there providing food and helping that event to be a success. So a big shout out. Based on the press release, they're talking about all the donors, the sponsors, the volunteers that have made this project happen. It looks like the doors will open in the fall of 2026. So y'all get your bathing suits ready. Fall of 2026.
I don't think we'll do that to the public.
No, we'll spare them.
Well, what I'm gonna do is that once it opens, if they'll let me, I'm gonna go do 25 in the pool every day. Not laps, cannonballs. That's an old Norm joke from Cheers. Sorry, I steal most of my decent material. But thank you once again to Billy Sewell, Golden Corral, the New River YMCA, all the people that were part of that groundbreaking ceremony this past week, or actually yesterday. So yeah, it's a great thing going on and good for the area. What do you guys remember? Either one that can start that wants to, as your first big story that you jumped on, or your first thing that stands out as what the first thing you did when you started doing sports writing. Is there anything that really stands out?
I don't know.
No,
You're
boy.
probably covering a high school baseball game somewhere or something.
We can only test our memory just so much.
That's right.
Okay, well, I will go to.
Well,
I'll go to an
I
event.
started in '72 in Shelby.
Oh, really?
2 years in Shelby before I came to
Titletown.
Jacksonville.
Yeah.
And I remember covering David Thompson in high school.
Was he from Shelby?
Yeah, he's
I
from-
knew he was from that part of the
Yeah,
state. But
he
yeah.
went to Crest High School. But
Shelby Crest.
Yeah, he remember seeing him play in a high school. It was
Well,
huge.
If you've been around the Shelby area, you know there's two schools. There's Shelby and Shelby Crest.
Yeah.
Shelby's the smaller one. They call it Titletown, though, because they've won quite their share
Oh,
of
yeah.
high school football state championships. Shelby Crest is the bigger, like usually 3A or 4A
Right.
size.
Larger school.
And so I never realized David Thompson went to Crest. So you got to cover him in high school.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was he?
Saw Michael Jordan play in high school too.
Where was that at?
In Jacksonville.
Yeah.
When he played,
Played
like
for,
when Laney played
Lane-
up here.
No, he played for. Was it Laney?
It was Laney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Saw him 2 years when he was a junior and a senior.
And that's one of those things. Looking back, if you could do things differently, and obviously I was a kid at some of that time, but so I didn't have the means to do the things I want to do. But I'd love to go on somewhere because he was playing locally here. You could have gone and seen him, you know.
Yeah.
So you guys covered him a little bit. Did you cover him?
I was there when with that game in Wilmington, and I'd heard before about Michael Jordan. Said, "Wow, this is because he was playing baseball." And the Jacksonville baseball coach told me, he said, "Listen, you ever get a chance, you got to see that guy play baseball. I mean basketball." And so I went with Eddie that night when he covered that game and watched him. And you know, over the years, you cover games and you hear about players who are being recruited by these colleges and all that, and you go see them. And when you see him, you sitting yourself, that guy's pretty good, but I mean, he's the best player on the court. That's not saying much, right?
Right.
And then you got to see Michael. I said, he was 6'4", 6'5", and he was as athletic as any 5'11", 6-foot guy Jackson had.
Yeah.
He was different. I knew he was going to ACC. You know, yeah, ACC level there.
Was that probably his senior year?
It was his senior year.
Yeah. Eddie Fogler was there for Carolina watching him play.
Oh, they say that there was nothing for Dean to show up, or Eddie, or
Yeah.
Roy Williams. Some of those. I don't know. I think Roy was on staff then.
He was.
For any of those guys to show up and at one of his basketball games.
It was, yeah.
It was like a who's who of college coaches over there.
And of course, they weren't. Carolina wasn't the only school there. They had lots of.
Oh,
other
yeah, that's
schools
what I mean.
Had coaches there, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he hadn't signed with Carolina at that point, so.
It always strikes me funny, and we're just going to kind of go at this and meander here and there. The letter he got from Coach Krzyzewski, you know, saying, you know, hope you do well at Carolina. Hope, you know, that letter's like basically hope everything works out for you there at Carolina. Well, I think it did pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
But chances are he'd have worked out anywhere, you know.
Definitely. Can you imagine the NIL money? If that was Jordan was playing now
For
how much he would
1
get?
year, probably, yeah.
He'd be one and done.
Yeah, I would say he wouldn't get it from UNC. He'd have to get it from the whole UNC system.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. It's so crazy now that just in the last 5 years, the college landscape has changed, and not for the better, in my opinion.
Me either.
And I'm sure you guys probably agree. Being seeing some of the heyday of the ACC, you know, the time when you were sitting in school and the tournament started and the teacher brought out the TV, you didn't work that day.
Right.
You had the TV on, you watched the ACC tournament. It's gone from that to where now most days you can't even tell when it started because, you know, it's the
Starts on
play-in
Tuesday.
games.
It
starts on Tuesday
And
with
there's
the-
27
with
Bottom,
teams
bottom
playing.
feeder teams.
Yeah, exactly.
I tell you.
So it's crazy.
But shoot, I remember when it wasn't bringing in TV. It was back when the first round of the ACC tournament was on radio.
Radio.
No TV.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that was it. You were scrambling to get a radio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now, and we've talked about this on the show before. I grew up a Carolina fan, and I see you're a Carolina fan too, right?
Yeah.
I've seen you on some of your stuff on Facebook. Yeah, the first when I looked, I hadn't read the name Southport, but I've seen your Carolina gear on Facebook before. But you remember the days when every game was not on television, like you talked about. So you listened to a lot on the radio. Do you remember how much more you could learn from listening to it on the radio than you did from television about the players? I could just about tell you in the mid 80s where every player was from. Jeff Lebo was from Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Michael Jordan's from Laney. Brad Daugherty, Black Mountain. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You heard Woody Durham give that description so much that it was so much different. That's the way you guys were with the paper. Some of your articles, looking back at some of the older articles, they're pages long because you're describing every facet of that game.
Maybe wrote too much. I
No, man. You don't understand as a kid and adults how much you look forward to Saturday morning opening that paper and seeing every single game in Onslow County covered to the T. That had to be a late night the way it used to work back then. What time did you guys usually get through on Friday nights?
It was 4 a.m. or something.
I would say
like
the first in
4
the
a.m.
mid '70s, it was like 4 a.m. I think eventually got pushed back.
Eventually they pushed it back to 2 a.m. or
2
something.
a.m. Yeah, gives
So
a
we had to
decent.
write faster. We couldn't write as long.
So how did you get all that done? They get it to copy, which wasn't like it is now with computers. It's a whole different world.
That's a good question.
Tell
Not
us
only did we
about
have
it.
to write our stories, we had to put the sports section together with the the wire news and everything.
So you had to like basically produce it and
Produce the
program
whole
it, yeah.
sports section and plus write our stories and how we did it in that time frame.
Man, I tell you that was back to start times for high school games were like 8 o'clock.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
And that was
Instead of 7.
And it's funny you should mention that because you know Jacksonville High School. If you've been to a game at Jacksonville High School recently, at the start of the game you're baking because it's so hot.
Oh, yeah.
Because they start at 7, and the people that made Jacksonville High School, or came from Jacksonville, made us Jacksonville people. So we were always wondering why in the world didn't somebody remember that and put the home side on the shady side? Well, back then games started at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
They didn't have that problem.
Plus, I don't think they started as early in August back then
Yeah.
as they do now.
That's true
They
too. It
start
was usually
toward-
after Labor Day, wasn't
Yeah, I
it?
think it's after Labor Day, in September at least before they
Well, that's
started.
when school started back then.
Right, right.
Just a different time. We're going to talk about the Jacksonville championship run. Probably we'll wait till after the break so we don't have to interrupt it. But going into the a typical night, you said you guys are done by 2 or 3 in the morning. Tell us how all that worked. I mean, you get all your information, and how do you get everything to the paper?
Well, we had some stringer help as far as taking phone calls and getting stuff. That was important. But first, I think that back in the early mid-'70s, not only did we have to write our stories and gloss through them for editing purposes, but send them back to typesetters who then almost basically had to retype.
Had to retype it, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of,
Were they doing it from your handwriting, or did you have to type it out?
no,
We type stories on paper, but
Yeah.
we hand it to them.
And let's tell the people the story we talked about before we went on air. It started out as manual typewriters, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. Those were the bad
for those
old
out
days.
there who know what they are.
Yeah, if anybody's ever seen one.
They say if you want to confuse kids nowadays, put them in a room with a manual typewriter, a rotary dial telephone,
Yeah, I know.
a VCR,
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's
this
crazy.
won't fit in my pocket, Mom.
It's just so amazing what how far we've come technology wise. Yet, do you sometimes think technology makes things more complicated?
I do.
Oh,
We were talking about Thursday night football.
Yeah.
Used to in the old days, Monday night football. I was telling Eddie at the golf course, you turn it on, you turn it to the channel, and you're watching football. Now you got to get out remote A, remote B, go to input A, input B, this, and go to your streaming site. Go to that. It'll ask you if you want it in English, Spanish, whatever. And all of a sudden, you've got a 12-step process on something you used to just turn on. Speaking of process, Hollywood's telling us it's time to go to break. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back on Sports Talk. Hey, welcome back to Sports Talker. I'm your host, Chris Raynor. We got Eddie Southards and Robert Holland with us today. Thank you guys for being with us. We do have our racing report we're jumping into. It's sponsored by Onslow County Motor Company. Ben Beasley and the gang. Go down there and get whatever kind of car you want, SUV, truck, race car, whatever you want. They got it, and they'll sell it to you, buddy. Our racing report, racing has entered, the NASCAR circuit has entered what I call the good old days. It's not like the good old days, but the 4 tracks they're going to the next couple of weeks are last week they were at Martinsville, or week before they were at Martinsville. Last week at Darlington, Bristol, and then Talladega. Those are old school tracks right there. So this past week they were at Bristol, Denny Hamlin, and it's funny because they've gone old school tracks, and all of a sudden an old school driver started winning. It's funny when you just say Denny Hamlin is old school. Back when he was racing, with the Earnhardts and all them, he was kind of, a second-tier driver or third-tier driver. But now he's one of the old school ones, and he's won the last 2 races. He won at Martinsville, and then one last week at Darlington. You guys ever been to a race at Darlington before, or NASCAR race at all? Never been to a NASCAR race?
No, I
I was
haven't.
one in Rockingham.
Rockingham?
And I think I've been to Charlotte too, but never to go to Darlington, no.
Well, if anyone's interested in old school racing, Rockingham is back. Have you heard that?
I heard it's coming back.
They're going to have, I still call it the Busch Series, the secondary series, Grand National Series, whatever you want to call it. I think it's Xfinity is the sponsor now. And they're having a truck race there in a couple of weeks coming up, sometime in April. So a good time to get back to the Rock, and hopefully that'll pave the way to get NASCAR's big cars back to Rockingham, because they need to go back to their roots. They finally reopened North Wilkesboro.
I was going to say, North Wilkesboro
a
just
great
reopened.
thing. It is so much different than it used to break my heart going to the mountains, going to Boone and riding by there and
See,
seeing
an
the
empty
trees.
track.
And the trees growing up through it. It was just terrible.
Yeah.
Little Lee Earnhardt Jr. and some others got together, got it cleaned up. They've opened it up where you can see it from the Highway 421 there. It's just a great thing they've done. But NASCAR right now is in the middle of their the old school schedule, we'll call it. Denny Hamlin won again in a Toyota, though. That still seems strange to say NASCAR Toyota on it. You got William Byron was second, a Chevrolet. He was the points leader coming in, so I'm willing to bet he's still the points leader after finishing second. Christopher Bell in a Toyota, Tyler Reddick in a Toyota, then Ryan Blaney and Chris Buescher both finished next in Fords. So NASCAR will be headed, like I said, to Talladega this week. Bristol this week. Bristol's a fun track. If you ever wanted to go to your first race, go to Bristol. It's like a half-mile track on steroids. The banking's so high that they run super speedway speeds, but on a little track.
Yeah, I've seen some unbelievable photos, like looking down
Oh,
on
yeah.
the track. It's amazing how tight it is.
And the stands, they call it Thunder Valley because the stands go up so high now because of all the interest they used to have there. It's weird because one of the biggest sporting events they ever had there, attendance-wise, was a football game. Remember about 3 or 4 years ago, Virginia Tech
Tech.
and
Right.
Tennessee, I think,
That's
played
right.
in the game there.
I wonder
and it was
what
like
this-
125,000 people watching
I
the
wonder
football
what the
game.
view was for the guy who was 125,000 where he was sitting.
I would say it would be better than places like the Big House or somewhere like that because Bristol is more up as a racetrack. So you're probably, it's not like being right next to the field, but you're right on top of the field. It's probably pretty cool to see the plays develop and stuff like that. So I was correct. William Byron finishing second didn't hurt his standing. He's still first. Cunningham moved up to second. The points. Christopher Bell third. Chase Elliott. You of course know the Elliott name from the old days. That's Bill's son. And then Tyler Reddick are the top five. So thank you to Onslow County Motor Company once again for sponsoring our racing report. Ben Beasley in the gang, and they'll be moving to Bristol this weekend. So that'll be an entertaining race to watch. So you guys didn't cover a lot of NASCAR stuff other than just getting the feed and putting it out there, right?
Yes.
One thing y'all did cover, you were both there at this time, from what I understand, if I got my dates right. 1982 Jacksonville Cardinals State Championship. Was that one of the biggest things y'all covered area-wise?
Yeah, it was.
Just because of the whole effect and the whole season. You know how those magical seasons are. It's like every week it gets a little bigger, doesn't it?
And that's one thing, too. I think it's good for the kids to experience playing in Raleigh or UNC for the state championship games. But it is something special when a town gets to host a state championship game like that. That's an atmosphere.
Man, I can tell you guys worked together for a long time. We had that exact same discussion Wednesday at the golf course about how back in the day, and I don't remember when it started. If I had to guess, I'd say sometime mid-'90s or so, or early '90s. But used to, all the state championships were at the high schools. I don't think volleyball in them were. I think they still, because I remember you guys covered some of the volleyball state championships down at Swansboro and stuff, and I think they were usually in Chapel Hill or in Raleigh or whatever. But the actual football championships, like, say Southwest and Swain County had 3 years in a row they played each other. 1 year it'd be at Southwest, then 1 year it would be at Swain, back and forth. And that was the same on Jacksonville. They played, I think, same two teams, right? Or same teams per year.
Greensboro knew the way to Jacksonville.
Yeah.
About tired of that trip.
And that was before 40 and all that, wasn't it? Or 40 may have been there, but it wasn't. A lot of people still use 70.
It's right. I think it was before 40 was extended.
So they were coming down the old two-lane Highway 70 for a lot of it, probably.
Yeah.
Wow. Times have changed. And that was back in the day when, say, Coach Durham, 82, he knows that he's got to play Greensboro Page in state championship. You heard what they had to do. They had to get in the car and go meet the team halfway to exchange Ooh, back then it was 8mm. It wasn't even VHS yet.
No, it wasn't.
That's crazy. So tell us something about that year that you guys remember some of the storylines and the things. I was telling Eddie that I remember the big write-up y'all did. You said it was like the commemorative issue, I guess.
Was it? Yes, it was. Kind of a celebration championship.
Yeah, like afterwards, yeah.
After they won, yeah.
With that picture of Bruce Simpson with the crown on. Remember that?
Ray Durham wasn't fond of that.
No, he didn't like that.
He didn't want King Bruce on the,
He said,
picture.
I remember him saying, he says, he didn't think much of it. He says, I'm sure Bruce liked it, but
Yeah.
Have you ever listened to the episodes where Coach Durham's been on here?
no, I haven't.
He was telling about how Bruce was basically a monster back before they made monster backs. Bruce would not follow the what he was supposed to do on defense. He would just go attack the ball. So they had a position they called their rover or monster, whatever they called it, and they just finally made Bruce that because they said, "Look, he's making 20 tackles a game by not being in the right place. Let's just let him go get the ball." That's like Bobby Boucher in the movie The Waterboy. Just attack the ball. So what are some stuff y'all remember from that championship year?
Eddie covered most of them.
I don't know. I just remember the championship game. I don't remember how many losses did Jacksonville have that year. Do you
They
remember?
were
They were
undefeated.
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 Yeah.
Okay, I couldn't. Yes.
And just dodged a bullet against Fayetteville in the.
Was it Bird, Fayetteville Bird, or 71st?
No, it was
Or it could be
one-
E. Smith. I can't remember.
Let's see. I can't remember. Oh,
Terry Sanford. was
Terry
it?
Terry Sanford, I think.
The only one I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
But,
I got 10 of them. So.
Yeah, there was a
But
bunch
I had
of them.
that goal line stand
Yeah.
on 4 plays inside 5 and
Wow.
kept him out of the end zone, and then went the other way and drove for a touchdown.
Was that in the Eastern Championship?
Yeah.
Yeah. Eastern Championship game.
So that's the one that put them over the top. Now, do you guys remember covering the Eastern Championship in the 2 years before 1980 when the quarterback broke his shoulder right before halftime? Coach Durham tells us that story. He was they had the lead right before the halftime and just playing very well. And so he has his quarterback. They either get a turnover or something that sets them up where they're going to try, a long pass or something to try and get a few points before halftime, maybe get in field goal range. Quarterback gets sacked and breaks his collarbone. Or his shoulder.
I wonder if that was in the championship game.
That was in 1980 it wasn't the championship game. You're right.
It was
Yes.
Greg Cooper.
Yep, Greg Cooper. Or as Coach Durham says, Cupper.
Cupper.
Greg Cupper. I can hear him right now saying it. But, yeah, that was in the championship game. You're absolutely right because they were playing very well against Page, and then that turned the game. Come out and your quarterback all of a sudden you don't have for the second half.
I think it changed a bit, but that was a really good Page team. Yeah. They just ran over Jackson a little bit in that.
And it's funny because one of the better Cardinal players in history, of course, was Eddie Colson. And Eddie was on the 80 team, but actually I didn't realize was not on the 1982 team that won state championship.
No, he was a senior
Yeah.
in 80.
He had graduated, yeah.
Yeah, he graduated.
Of course, went on to a great year at Carolina. And off the camera, we were talking about the current Cardinal running back. Well, not current anymore. He's a former running back now, but getting ready to be a current Bill Belichick first Bill Belichick disciple, DeMond June.
Yeah.
Do you see a lot of similarities between him and Eddie?
I've only seen highlight film of him. It's kind of hard to say.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Maybe DeMond might have just a touch more speed or something. I'm not sure.
I think Eddie would just run you over rather than go around you.
Yeah, that's
Well,
true.
of course, Eddie, by his time, his senior year, he was a good, solid 220.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like a Larry Zonka type player. He'd run over people before he'd run
He was
away
the
from
old school fullback kind of
Yeah.
back in those days,
He
in the
was.
early 80s.
And he played tailback at Carolina, but he's not what you would consider a tailback nowadays, that size. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, not
and
that
DeMond's
big.
got some defensive ability, too.
Yeah.
So it's a possibility what
And
happens.
it's curious to see if they end up putting him in linebacker or something, or a strong safety, because he played a really strong linebacker for Jacksonville.
I'm going to say the running back position at Carolina is wide open. So
Yeah.
there's no
Yeah,
telling.
that's true. Thanks to the NIL and the transfer portal. And we're going to touch more on that later on. Back to that Cardinal team in 82, Eddie Colson, what were those games like? Obviously, the championship game you said was the most people you've ever seen at a high school game
Oh,
at
yeah.
a stadium, at a
Yeah,
facility.
the whole field was around, people standing around the field along the fence. It was it must have been at least 5,000, maybe more than that, people there.
And back then, I think didn't they add bleachers in the end zone?
They brought more bleachers in for
to-
the end zones.
to
But yeah, it was
meet
standing
all-
room only, definitely.
and you got that big area between the one end zone and the Northwoods housing area there. I can only imagine it was probably full of people looking over everybody's shoulder trying to watch it. All right, we're going to take our second break. Thank you, Hollywood. When we come back, we'll have our hurricane watch, or as I call it this week, the tropical storm watch. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to Sports Talk. I'm your host, Chris Raynor. You heard the Scorpions singing Rock You Like a Hurricane there. It's time for the Hurricanes Watch. This week, it is a tropical storm watch, borderline tropical depression. The Canes had a rough week. Before we went on the air last week, last Wednesday, they had won 5-1 against the Washington Capitals, who are the best team in the East, and just beat them down 5-1. There was a big fight at the end, all kinds of crazy stuff. Since then, they've gone 0-3. They've gone on a road swing. They lost at Detroit 5-3, lost at Boston 5-1, and Boston's not one of the better teams, or Detroit. And then Buffalo is not one of the better teams. They lost 3-0 there Tuesday night. So the Canes are kind of in a swoon, but sometimes you have to look at the big picture. I think they've got some players they're trying to get healthy, so they're not playing them as many shifts. And they've already locked up the third slot in the Eastern playoffs, and they already know the team they're playing. So nothing's going to change whether they win or lose. So you can imagine it's kind of like the NFL when, they know that they got what they're doing. They're the top seed. Most times the starters are going to sit. The NFL, the Vegas odds go all crazy, and people just lose their mind because all of a sudden you got your Kansas City Chiefs, the number one team in the league, and all of a sudden they're getting killed by the Jacksonville Jaguars because they're not playing their starters. So very similar to that. The Canes will be in action tomorrow night at home. I'll get to go. Hollywood, I didn't have an extra one, or I'd have took you with me again, you and Ashley. We went. I took. You guys know Ashley Mosley, the owner here at the station. Took him and Hollywood. We went. Had a sponsor give us some tickets at barbecue lab. And man, we sat right Hurricanes bench. So Hollywood had been before years ago, but Ashley had never been, and he loved. He's spoiled because where else can you go? I mean, your glass front right behind the bench. Rod Brendamore was right there. If we had him in plexiglass between us, we could have given him some advice and stuff. Or
I'm sure he'd have taken it.
Or took some hockey pucks off the face or something. But I'm sure he didn't want advice from us. But it was a great game. That was the one the weekend before, and we had a great time. So going back. They'll play tomorrow at 3:00 puck drop there against the New York Rangers, which a lot of people consider the New York Rangers' second home ice is Raleigh because there's so many Rangers fans in Cary. And so it's liable to be a fairly hostile crowd. But anyway, we'll go and have a good time. But the Canes are still, like I said, in third place. There's nothing that can change with that. So the playoffs will start. You were asking Robert about the playoffs. It looks like they'll start around – the season ends April 17th, and so probably the next week. So I'm guessing around April 24th or so they'll start the playoffs. And they do 4 rounds, 3 rounds in your conference, and then the Stanley Cup Finals. Now, did you guys cover that much when they won in 2006?
No, I was.
Other than just had you already retired then?
I was on the city desk, and I was out of
Were you?
Springfield.
Okay. How about you? Were you still in the business then?
Yeah, I was still in the business, but I was working in Fayetteville.
Okay. And, of course, hockey's not as big down here, especially back then. Now, it's getting pretty big here because before Coach Rod Brendamore came in, they had like about 8 years where they didn't make the playoffs in a row. They made it all 7 years since he's been coach, which is pretty, in any franchise or any sport is pretty phenomenal. So if you ever get a chance to go, man, it's a pretty good atmosphere. Have y'all been to hockey games before in Raleigh?
I went to, I worked in Southern California for 10 years, and I went to see
some LA games.
Saw Gretzky play
With the Kings?
with the Kings.
Yeah.
That's maybe the only hockey game I've been to live.
How about you?
No, I haven't. I love to sit, but I'd like to be able to get a seat on that along the ice there.
Next time we get behind the glass, we'll call you. All right.
Oh,
It's a whole different atmosphere.
It
obviously,
is,
than
man.
To be in person and then try to watch it on television.
And you've heard that about NASCAR before. People say, "Well, watching on TV, it just looks slow," but go watch it in person. It's a whole different world.
Yeah.
Now, you were talking about covering the Kings. We would be remiss if we didn't mention a major sports milestone this past week. Alex Ovechkin, for the Washington Capitals, passed Gretzky. It was so crazy because he did it in the same exact number of games as Gretzky did. Wasn't that wild?
yeah, I could say there's going to be no argument over who played more games.
Yeah, you're talking about like
Exactly.
1,400 games, and they come down to the same number of games. It's a lot like you've covered the Duke-Carolina rivalry for years. Some of the stats on it are scary. That they're like almost dead even on number of points, number of wins, in the last whatever years. It's just it's wild the way those sports, and that's why those rivalries are like that.
It's amazing, though, as much as the goals is playing that long and that well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and he's still in really good shape.
Yeah.
I mean, you see him playing. This dude is. I saw him. It was a couple of years ago because they were making the comparisons between him and LeBron because LeBron has a lot of longevity too. And of course, you see LeBron get hit and he falls down like he's dying, or all of a sudden he's back up and back in the game. I saw Ovechkin. It was a video on Facebook. It showed LeBron doing a flop. Then it showed Ovechkin getting hit with a puck in his jaw. He spits out a tooth and goes in for his regular shift. That's hockey players are just a whole different. I mean, they're a little out there. They're a whole different animal. That's a special breed to be going down the ice and all of a sudden somebody just slam you into the wall. A lot like roller derby on
Yeah.
with a hockey puck. But thank you once again to Downey's Heating and Air Conditioning for sponsoring our Hurricane Watch. I think the Canes will pick it up as it goes into the playoffs. We hope, and we'll see. Hopefully, they're the only team in North Carolina to win a world title. You've covered the Panthers or seen them. Panthers got there twice, lost. We were talking about the Hornets. They've never got past the second round.
I don't see the
think.
Hornets getting there anytime soon.
No, I don't either.
They got a little work to do there. Is Michael Jordan still the
I think
owner, or
he's
he
more,
sell
still a
that?
minority
He-
owner.
He's
I
a
think
minority.
So he has
owner.
sold them-
He
the-
sold the majority ownership.
That's what I was thinking. He sold the majority stake. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we ready for that break, Hollywood? I saw you reaching for the trigger, so I thought I'd get it first. We'll be right back on Sports Talk, and we'll finish up with Robert Holland and Eddie Southards. Hey, welcome back to Sports Talk. I'm your host, Chris Raynor. Time for This Day in Sports History, Friday, April 11th. All this stuff happened on April 11th at one time or another. Got our guest today with us, Eddie Southards, Robert Holland from the Jacksonville Daily News, sports writer extraordinaires, we'll call you guys. You were the Woodward and Bernstein of your era here in Jacksonville. That's what it's equivalent to here in Jacksonville. That's
I don't know. I don't think we threw any president out of
No, ain't
office.
any presidents.
You probably had a coach or two that was on the hot seat back then, weren't they?
Well,
Maybe. Not intentionally, but
Right now, the younger generation is going, Woodward and Bernstein? All right, we're going to read these. These are all things that happen. All this is brought to you by the Redneck Barbecue Lab. They have a new location down in Beaufort. So if you guys want to try it, give it a whirl. You ever been to the barbecue lab before?
No.
No.
Well, there's one if you go into Raleigh on exit 319, McGee's Crossroad. Excellent barbecue. We ate there before we went to the hockey game. Hollywood was impressed. That brisket and barbecue is unreal.
Yeah, I had to get an extra mac and cheese, jalapeno mac and cheese.
Yeah. Everything that got a little twist to it.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
good stuff. Thank you to Jerry Stevenson and the Barbecue Lab for sponsoring this and for getting us those awesome tickets. All right, the first one up is back in 1750. That was a long time ago for sports, wasn't it?
I don't remember that.
I don't remember this either. I didn't even know they did stuff like that. But you had a boxer named Jack Slack. That almost sounds made up.
Yeah.
Like a stage name. Jack Slack. One thing better be Jap Slap. Jack Slack retains the champion of England boxing title, beats Frenchman, I guess that's Jean Petit, in 7 rounds in Harleston, England, acknowledges the first international prize fight. So this is one of the first big sporting events of any time back then, I guess. Yeah. Who knows? All right, you got the next one, Robert.
Okay, 1896, Hungarian swimmer Alfred Hayos beats Otto Hirschman of Austria by 0.6 of a second to win the inaugural Olympic 100-meter freestyle final in the Athens Games. Also takes out the 1,200 meters on the same day.
That's a lot of swimming.
That's a lot of names to try to pronounce.
It is. You got the tough one right out the gate there.
Yeah, you did.
All right, Eddie.
1907, your Giants future baseball Hall of Fame backstop, Roger Bresnahan, becomes first catcher to wear shin guards.
Brilliant. Because if you've ever seen catchers, they're all over them.
I can't imagine catching without shin guards.
Well, imagine this. We did one time. It was like 1898 was the first one to come up with the catcher's mitt. Catcher's.
Without a mitt, that's
Yeah.
even worse.
How can you, with a guy tipping off foul balls, how were you back there without a mask?
Of course,
So-
they didn't throw 100 miles an hour back then.
That's
still.
true, too. And you probably were standing back there catching it on the bounce and all that
Probably.
stuff. All right, let's see. Up to 1921 here, KDKA in Pittsburgh. That's a radio station. I thought K was always west of the Mississippi. You know the radio business. Is that what it used to be?
I mean, that's what it's supposed to be, but you're talking about, this is the
yeah, this was
the beginning of
1921.
radio. So,
True
yeah.
that, okay. Oh, you weren't even around back then.
No, I was
No,
not.
okay. KDKA in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania broadcast the first radio sporting event. Wow. A boxing match between lightweights Johnny Ray and Johnny Dundee. The first live, well, I guess it was live, radio sporting event. I don't think they had any way of taping it, so it had to be live, yeah.
Yeah, pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, that's awesome there. All right, Robert.
1959, Dodger pitcher Don Drysdale hits his second opening day home run.
All right, we've got to the first person that I've heard of in all this stuff here. I hadn't heard of any of the others until this.
That won't happen anymore. Now we have a designated hitter.
That's true. Do they do that in both leagues now?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. All right, you got the next one, Eddie.
1963, Milwaukee Braves future baseball Hall of Fame pitcher Warren Spahn beat New York Mets 6-1 for his 328th win, the most by a left-hander in Major League Baseball history.
And that may still stand. I don't know. Steve Carlton was left-hander, wasn't he?
Yes.
So he may have beaten that, but I know that one may still stand.
I think it does.
All right, now we're getting into this week's stuff, stuff that's going on this week in current day. In 1965, the 29th U.S. Masters Tournament, Augusta National Golf Course, Jack Nicklaus wins the second of his 6 Masters titles with a record 271, 17 under. He beat Gary Player and Arnold Palmer by 19 strokes. You talk about 3 big dogs in the sport right there, especially at that time. Now, when they had the opening tee off this week, it was Nicklaus, of course, and you said Gary Player was the other one?
Nicklaus, Gary Player, and Tom Watson.
And Tom Watson, okay. Yeah, Tom's elevated up to honorary starter, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Now, none of those still play, do they?
No.
I didn't know if Watson still did or not. He would be the closest.
He quit playing a couple of years ago, I
Okay.
think.
How about that run he had? And I don't want to get off too far, but what was it, the British Open about 8-10 years ago, where he was leading coming to the last hole? He gets over pumped and air 7-iron instead of hitting, like maybe an 8 that would have stayed on the green, and ends up losing a playoff. That was tough though, because at his age at that time, man, that would have been an awesome.
It'd been a great story.
Yeah, that'd have been a
Yeah,
great story.
It would have been. Stewart, I'm still mad at Stewart Sink for beating him.
Okay, in 1966, at the 30th U.S. Masters, Jack Nicklaus becomes the first back-to-back champion, winning an 18-hole Monday playoff with Tommy Jacobs and Gabe Brewer.
Now I don't think they do that anymore at the Masters, do they? Not the 18 hole. I
No,
think
they
they
have
four-
a-
it's four
I think they
hole.
have the.
Yeah, it's like a 3 or 4 hole
yeah.
aggregate thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what it is. I think that's what Players Championship.
Does the U.S. Open still do 18 holes?
Yes, U.S.
Wow.
Open still does 18-hole playoff.
That's
on
tough there.
Mondays.
The British Open, I know, does the same
They
thing
do
as the
the
others.
they do the 3 or 4. They do the 4 hole. They started it, I think, over there doing the 3 or 4 hole playoff.
Now, you guys covered golf for years, obviously, with the sports desk. What's your thoughts on them moving the PGA to May? I think it was a great move.
Really, because I think the PGA pretty much is almost bordering on irrelevant the way
Right.
it was moved and back.
And that's we said the same thing a couple weeks ago talking about it. When it was in September, it was almost an afterthought because the 3 big ones, and then you had the month in between. So now you've got Masters in April, PGA in May, US Open in June, and then the July you have the British Open, or the Open as they like
The
to
Open
call
Championship,
it. Yeah.
they call it now.
Now, did you do the last one there? Yeah, you had
That was 66.
66.
right?
Okay.
That's me. Yeah.
All right. You did that one?
Yeah.
Okay, so you got the next one, Eddie. I'm sorry.
1975, Hank Aaron returns to County Stadium as a Milwaukee player after his off-season trade from the Atlanta Braves. The Brewers beat the Cleveland Indians 6-2.
And I love to pick you guys' brains as we go along with this stuff. Do you still consider him the all-time home run champ
I do.
because of the steroid issue and
Yeah.
the way he was passed? I do too. In my mind, he's still the home run champ. And I love that little. You're on Facebook. I don't think you're on Facebook, are you?
Yeah.
I didn't see it on there. But have you seen the thing where it shows him putting dirt on his bare hands with a wooden bat? That's the way he prepared for hitting.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to find a baseball player who doesn't have gloves on now when he
And,
goes.
and gloves and the pine tar and all that stuff. He did dirt and bare hands. All right. In 1981, Larry Holmes beat Trevor Burbick in a unanimous decision in Las Vegas to retain his WBC heavyweight boxing title. Now, when you guys were covering those sports, boxing was a big deal. I mean, the heavyweight championships were huge. Obviously, Tyson getting knocked out by Buster Douglas. It's Buster
Yes.
Douglas, right?
I'm not
Buster
sure
Douglas.
if we got that in time because that happened on a
They were fighting in Japan, so it's a big time.
yeah,
difference.
and I think the time difference plus the way I just don't think the result of that fight moved in time.
Yeah, I don't
for
think
us to
so.
get in the paper that next day. I remember shocked.
And
when I
it's
saw
funny
it.
how memories like that stick in your mind. I remember it was in the late 80s because we were at a buddy's house at Wrightsville Beach when I was in college down at UCW watching it. They were one of the few people back then that would pay. I don't even know how you did it back then. You probably had to send a money order or something. You didn't do it on the computer or anything, or on your phone. But we
Yeah.
watched that live. And
You had to
yeah,
go
it was,
buy a ticket, pay-per-view. I think no, not pay-per-view. What do they call it? I mean, anyway,
It was something like that. Through
you had to
his
go
cable,
buy a
yeah.
ticket. So
But we were able to watch
Closed-
it there, and it
closed
was
circuit.
just amazing. Closed circuit. That's
That's what they
exactly what
called
it's called. Yeah. All right, you're up next.
1989, first playoff goal scored by a goalie, Ron Hextall, of visiting Philadelphia Flyers, shoots into Washington Capitals' empty net while his team is shorthanded an 8-5 win.
And that happens every blue moon, but it's cool for a goalie because the only way it can happen just about is an empty netter. When they pull the goalie to try and score another goal or, have an advantage there at the end. And he'll just flip it down every now and then it goes in. All right, in 2015, the 168th Grand National. We learned this a couple of weeks ago. That's a horse race, apparently. It took us a while from living in the South. The Grand National up to us was always car racing, but the 168th jockey in Aspel with this consecutive Grand National aboard a 25-1 shot mini clouds under Trevor Hemming's third Grand National victory. That would have been a good chunk of change there if you put $100 down on that one.
Okay, in 2023, NHL Boston Bruins break the record for most team points in a season at 133 in a 5-2 victory over the visiting Washington Capitals. Montreal Canadiens had held a record of 132 since 1977.
And that's always been a weird thing with the NHL, the way they do the points. If you get a win, it's 2 points. Or I don't know what it was back then, but now it's 2 points. If you get a tie and a loss, you still get 1 point. So you can actually get more points than what you would get just by winning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. But that's this day in sports history, Friday, April 11th. Thank you to Redneck Barbecue Lab for sponsoring that. And that brought back a few memories, didn't it? Some of the stuff y'all had covered. Have you guys ever been to Walton's Distillery before?
No.
Well, free tomorrow, Saturday, April 11th, between 12 and 5 at 261 Ben Williams Road in Jacksonville. Don Walton has his family's moonshine recipe. They got different flavors and stuff. They'll have taste testing. They'll have a free tour, food, music, open house. Hollywood, you're doing a remote. Tell us a little bit about that. Did I?
No,
put you on the
we're
spot?
not. We're not doing it remote.
Not doing remote. Okay, my
No,
bad.
no,
I'm sorry.
We're not doing remote, but it's going to be a fun time, and it always is.
Are you gonna try to go?
I'm not. I'm not going out there. No, I'm not. I'm not making it out there, buddy. But it's always great attended, and the music's great. They always have some great bluegrass and country, and it is just an extremely fun time. And I know they've done some great things out there. So check it out.
If anybody gets a chance, 12 to 5, it's an awesome thing. I've done it before. It's pretty cool. All right. Well, let's talk about you guys. We're pretty much open ended here. Anything you guys want to talk about the good old days of covering sports in Onslow County? Any stories come to mind? This is your open forum right here,
I don't know about covering high school sports, but I remember.
or any sports.
Okay. I got to interview Joe Frazier out at Camp Lejeune.
Really?
They were filming. There's an old TV show called Trucking On or something like that. Starred Claude Akins. And they were filming an episode at Camp Lejeune for some reason, and Joe Frazier was a guest star on the show. So, and that's in the '70s.
So I was guessing late 70s.
Yeah.
Back when we had the TV craze on.
That was it. Yeah.
Convoy, all those trucking stuff going on. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like that.
There was even TV shows that spun off like BJ and the Bear and stuff like that. So yeah,
Now,
I'm
listen,
guessing that time.
I'm 51, but I like some old soul. Did you get to meet Claude Akins?
No, didn't meet him.
Oh man, he's a classic actor.
Yeah,
man.
that would have been cool to
yeah.
meet him too. But no, they just arranged for me to talk to Joe Frazier.
Well,
So
Smoking Joe Frazier.
I had him one-on-one. That was pretty cool.
that is awesome.
Well, now, did you ask him about the iconic Howard Cosell call on him? Down goes Frazier. You know what I'm talking about?
No, I mean, look, we may have. I don't remember. for
And be
sure.
careful. Like I say, Joe Frazier
true.
probably still had a pretty good left at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
did you get a picture?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
Well, see, back then we all didn't have a camera.
Oh,
in
that's
our
right.
hand, remember?
It was like, you had that film. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, exactly.
I've told my kids before. I said Michael Jordan used to have a camp down at Hanover Hall down at UNCW. Every year, when he first started in the pros, he had his basketball camp down there at UNCW, which they were crazy for ever letting him get gone. But anyway, I digress with that. But so we were back there one day and we saw the camp going on and saw Jordan and everything. Interacting with the campers and stuff for a little bit. And my kids said, "Did you get a picture?" I'm like, "We didn't have a camera with us in our pocket then."
Isn't that funny? But
that you talked on
forget
the
about
phone
that.
with.
You forget about that, like
Yeah.
the conveniences we have now. You totally
Yeah.
forget about that.
If you had a camera, you had to run back to the apartment and get it, stuff some 35 millimeter film in it,
Yeah.
and hope for the best.
I remember a time back when Eddie was working in California, and I went out there to visit him, and we drove down. He lived out in Victorville, and we drove, was it a couple hours
About 2 hours.
to Los Angeles just to see things around there. And we just hopped by to go check out the forum where the Lakers used to play.
The
And
great four, the fabulous four, they
Fabulous
call it.
so we drove by there and said, that's cool. This is neat. And then we just walked around and checked out the place. And there was a guy selling tickets.
Wow.
This is at the time of the Celtics Lakers.
This was
NBA
during
finals.
this was during the NBA finals.
Yeah.
With the Celtics, the heyday.
So
yeah.
I was thinking, we
Larry
thought about
Bird,
that for a minute.
Magic.
So we were planning to return the next night for a Dodger game, but I said, what the heck? So we talked to the guy and we got 2 tickets. And here's the fun: we got to see Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, and James Worthy against Kevin McHale, Larry Bird, Robert Parrish in an NBA championship game. And we paid $80-something for 2 tickets.
Yeah.
Wow.
Try getting an NBA championship game for that.
Yeah, probably now in the NBA finals. That ticket then would probably equate to a couple
Yeah.
$1,000. Yeah,
It was-
easily.
Easily.
Wow, and you got to see him in the heyday too.
Yeah.
And we've talked about it many times about how in my opinion, the NBA's heyday was the Jordans, the Magic Johnson. Bird and Johnson started it. When they came out of their rivalry from Michigan State and Indiana State. When they came into the league, that started it. But man, Jordan, Dr. J, and them took it to a whole nother level. Especially Jordan. With that run the Bulls had in the '90s. That was that's the difference, in my opinion, between NBA basketball now and then. If I'm flipping through and there's absolutely nothing else on, I may watch an NBA game, a little bit of it. Back then, I would sit there and go to WGN and watch every night of the Chicago Bulls and they weren't even a local team, just because Jordan was, and it was must-see TV.
It was. It was appointment time television.
Yeah.
Yep.
While I lived in California, it was the same way with the Lakers because you had Magic Johnson and Kareem. So that was another I watched the NBA a lot then.
Well, on that thread of differences, I've got a quiz for you guys.
Oh boy.
It's just opinion, whatever your opinion is. That's the beauty of it. You don't have to study. All right. I already know the answer to this one on you. Carolina or Duke? I'll start with you because I know his answer.
Carolina. I went to school there.
Carolina, okay. Do you even want to say it, or just we'll just assume? What do you think is the best or your favorite basketball movie?
Hoosiers.
I was gonna say Hoosiers.
Yeah, a lot of people love that because it's fact based, and man, Gene Hackman he nailed that part there as the coach. That and so many times you see new coaches come in, and everybody's losing their mind because they don't do it the way the old guy did. Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes it needs to be changed, All right, this is another one: Dean Smith or Coach K?
Dean.
I just think he was more of an innovator. Coach K won more games, but I think just Dean. They made rules to change the stuff he was doing because he would innovate the whole the four corners. They made shot clock.
I will admit this though, for a coach for a single game, I would take Coach K over a lot.
And a lot of people say Bobby Knight might actually be the best at getting like motivator type coach. But Dean had the innovations. Coach K may have been the best that maybe in game coach. You're right about that. All right, this is a loaded question. The GOAT in basketball, greatest of all time.
No question. To me, Jordan.
MJ.
So no LeBron. Okay, I agree. I've always been Jordan. And that was the difference to me is because even when LeBron broke the record, I didn't even watch that night. I realized it was happening, but it never kicked in to watch. If Jordan had been breaking that record, you'd have had half the country watching. It's just must see basketball. All right, NBA playoffs or March Madness?
March Madness.
March Madness.
How about them Gators? Another title.
Yeah, they did, but I tell you what, Houston
I was pulling for Houston.
Houston threw that away in the last 2 minutes.
Speaking of throwing away, Duke threw their game away. I mean, you had 2 games back to back that, were just in the bag almost.
Houston benefited from one and lost in the other.
Yeah, that's true.
That's right.
All right, let's move on to hockey. GOAT in hockey. Greatest of all time.
Gretzky.
I still say Gretzky.
Gretzky. I said Gretzky.
Ovechkin, I mean, what he's done, and it maybe looked on different later, but when you look at the assists too, and hockey's one of those rare sports where you get a statistic for an assist and a goal. It doesn't go on the scoreboard that way, but his assists, nobody will ever come close to that probably. No. Same thing with Nolan Ryan's strikeouts. Nobody will ever touch that anymore because of the way pitchers are nowadays. All right, best hockey movie. Most people can only think of 1 or 2.
Slapshot.
Slapshot.
Yeah, I would say that.
The Hanson brothers should have won an Oscar.
Yeah, all them dudes with them glasses on, they were hardcore. Now some people will say Miracle because the newer generation because they didn't live through that like we did, what the actual experience, but they through the movie they've been able to
Actually,
do it.
It wasn't on live TV.
No.
No, and a lot of people don't realize that. If you had some inside information, you could have made a killer bet with the bookie back then. Because it was 1980. They played it like around 11 or 12 noon or so, and it aired that evening about 5 or 6, 7, something like that. And one of the most iconic moments, in sports history too. All right, Wrigley Field or Fenway Park?
Fenway Park.
I've been to both. I'd say Fenway.
All right, best baseball movie or your favorite baseball movie?
Bull Durham.
Yeah, I'd say Bull Durham.
And I think Bull Durham is as close to minor league baseball as you can get.
Yeah,
all the meetings on the mound, the conversations, it's dead on. All right, GOAT in baseball. This one's a lot harder. You get a lot more wild answers than you do in any other sport.
Yeah, in baseball.
Some people say Nolan Ryan because he's the most dominant pitcher, even though his record wasn't that great.
It's one of those things too.
You get Babe Ruth a lot.
Recency bias. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of hard.
But it's different though because in baseball, in most sports, it'll go back to maybe the earliest the 60s or 70s. In baseball, you get people back in the 20s that they'll say Babe Ruth was the best.
Yeah.
So it's so hard to say.
I think I would like Aaron because
say
I think
Aaron.
Beyond the home runs, Aaron was a heck of a player in the field.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He was a 5-tool player.
That's true. All right, Pete Rose, Hall of Fame or not?
I'm of the opinion that it's time to let it go.
Yeah.
And
I
let
am
him-
too.
I think
Especially
have
with
him.
baseball's ties to gambling now.
think it should
Really?
happen.
DraftKings, I think it's realistic to me to put Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame.
I just wish it would have happened years ago when it should have, you know. But
I wish they'd done it
I agree,
before
it's time.
while he's still alive.
There's actually, I understand it. It really isn't much keeping him out. It's not that baseball is forcing him out as much as the Writers Association has a rule, and it's up to them to enforce it.
Yeah.
They could relax that rule and
So
let
they
him
need to
in.
get the rule changed, probably.
Yeah, so
yeah.
the Writers Association
I think
can
you're right.
change.
Yeah.
It's like some of these kooky laws that are still in the books that people don't know about, but they're still a law, but it's not enforced.
Right.
All right, greatest of all time in football.
I'd say Jim Brown.
I would go with that. Again, recency bias, it may influence that. People
Yeah.
almost forget how dominant he was. And in
And a lot of
90s,
people go with just the number of rings that Brady has, but Brown only played, 9 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, he went off at
and he was a
young
dominant
age.
player when he decided to quit.
Yeah, he was at the top of his game.
All right, AT&T Stadium is the one down in Dallas, the Palace in Dallas. You know, Jerry's place, they call it. So Lambeau Field or AT&T Stadium?
Lambeau Field, I looked at
Plus
that.
history there.
Yeah, I've been there before. Have y'all been there before?
No,
No,
I
I've
was-
never
Never
see
get
it.
a chance.
That's
No.
on my bucket list to go to
It
the
is
Packers
because
game.
I'm a Panthers fan. My son's a Packers fan, and we went a couple times. And just the way they do the experience there is so different. It's like you're part of the family when you're there. All right, favorite football movie or best football movie? Some of the ones we had before: Friday Night Lights, Varsity Blues. Trying to think of some of the others that have been called before. Football movies a little different.
I don't know that I can think of anything that's really touched the public's imagination.
Well, Friday Night Lights is kind of close to the Texas football,
Yeah.
experience. So it's
But I
similar.
get it confused with the TV series, so I mean,
All right, this was going to be interesting. Well, first of all, I'll do it this way: the greatest of all time in golf.
I'm old school. I have to say Nicholas.
I say
Yeah.
Nicholas. That's mine. Just
Hi.
because of the way he dominated each, like he would take a different opponent each decade. Just about.
Yeah.
He
had more big name rivals.
I tell you what,
than
it's
Tiger had.
and Tiger blew it. What he could have done,
Yeah.
I think he would have definitely broken Jack's majors record
Oh, I think so too.
had he not just.
Throwing it
Man,
away
yeah.
with his
Yeah.
private life.
Some of the things that caused his health issues and stuff. Yeah. One of the things that strikes me too, and you guys as sports writers probably run across this stat before, the number of second places that Nicholas had in majors
Yeah.
was
he had-
unreal.
He had 19 of them.
Yeah, something like that. 19, 20, something like that. And then third place was even more.
And there
so
was-
he was always
He had
right
like
there in the mix.
35.
There was that
third
one
place.
year too where who knows what he would have done as far as a run for the Grand Slam because he had some second place finishes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like that loss to Lee Trevino in was it the British Open or
And
US
I don't
Open?
think there's ever been a golfer to win all four in 1 year, right?
Not in one. Well,
No,
Now,
not
has there,
1 year.
Has there been one that's won
Tiger-
4 in a row, though?
Tiger
Yeah,
won 3.
Tiger.
Did he?
He won 3.
Like over 2 years, yeah.
Yeah, over 2 years. He won, yeah. Because I was there when he won the Masters, complete the Tiger Slam, they called it.
All right, best golf movie or your favorite golf movie? Mine's Caddyshack still. I know a lot of people love Tin Cup, but
Tin Cup.
Caddyshack is just, to me, what
I
club,
agree with you, Caddyshack.
what club golf is, like country club golf is, that's Caddyshack.
It had laugh out loud moments.
And it was supposed to be just a low budget, knockoff movie that next thing you know has been a classic for, oh my gosh, since 1980 or so was when it came out.
Yeah.
Does it seem like to you guys the 80s were almost 50 years ago? 1980 is almost 50 years
Seems
ago.
like another lifetime.
I try not to
does.
think about that, but it does pop into my head every now and then.
Yeah.
So you think Tin Cup too?
Yes,
The only knock I have on Tin Cup is you hit a 3-wood to 2 feet short of the green. That's not coming off. Not a 3-wood. I mean, with the spin they do with the irons, I could see it, but it goes up there. And that was just a little.
Well, of course, then too, you don't have your groundskeeper taking a hack at the garden flowers too.
That's true too. I bet if you get Bill Burry was your groundskeeper, you would.
I don't think you see that over at the Jacksonville Country Club.
That's true too. Good point. Touche. All right. These last 3 are just kind of fillers in. Favorite or greatest sports moment? To me, it's the Miracle on Ice, just because of what it meant to this country in 1980. That's always been my favorite, my most iconic. There's obviously been several. What do you think some of the other ones are?
Yeah,
I think Hank Aaron breaking Babe Ruth's record
Yeah.
when he was number 715.
The guy running along beside him on the base path.
Yeah.
Nowadays, he'd have been stopped
Oh,
3
yeah.
feet onto the
He
field.
never got field.
Yeah. Whole different world. Some famous picture of Ali, with his the glove to his chest after he's knocked
Ali
out.
Liston.
Was it Liston? Sonny
Yeah.
Liston? Yeah.
That's a great one, yeah.
There's been a lot of really good ones. But to me, the Miracle on Ice just it did something to this country for a little while. Kind of,
And it's still a great moment. You see it on TV every now and then.
Yeah.
And if it's toward the end of it, well, I got to watch it because I got to listen to Al Michaels' call and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Do you believe in miracles? Yeah. And that was one of the things we talked about too. The most iconic sports calls you got, obviously, down goes Frazier. Giants win the pennant. That's one. The one you were talking about, do you believe in miracles? I'm trying to think of some of the other ones.
Here's a classic too, and because they don't play the whole thing through. When Kirk Gibson hit his home run,
Yeah.
I don't
against the
believe
A's.
what I just saw.
But if you they played the whole thing. He inadvertently, because the Dodgers had gotten Gibson from Detroit, and he inadvertently said the Tigers win.
Did he really?
He did. He didn't say the Dodgers, the Tigers.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't realize that.
They pick it up before, right after he said that.
And now that you say that, thinking about Harry Carey, any Cubs win. Cubs win. Cubs win.
Yes.
He's already had about
He's
a 12-pack by the time he gets
He,
into
he doesn't say it as much as he slurs it out.
And his son, Skip Carey, said, Braves win, Braves win.
All right, one more. Less filling or tastes great?
Tastes great always.
Tastes great.
Tastes great.
I'm past worried about filling. I mean, I'm just
Right.
Yeah, I'm tastes great. Look at me. But if you ever want to see some really cool stuff, go on YouTube and just type in Miller Lite tastes great, less filling. All those commercials come up, and man, you talk about the sports heroes that we had in our time. You got John Madden busting through the wall at the end. You got Boog Powell. You got Bubba Smith. All the great ones. Larry Zonka. It's just a great thing to watch.
I'll try that.
So that's kind of a walk down memory lane we like to ask some folks. You guys, this is your open forum at the end. If you want to share any other memory or something you had from when we're going to wind it up here in a minute, but if you want to share any other memories you had writing with the Daily News, was there any other besides you two guys that wrote with you that you want to kind of mention or recognize? And obviously, I want to give a shout out to Chris Miller now with the JD News. He has a difficult job, and he's one guy now doing what you guys used to have a couple of y'all and some stringers and all that doing, and he can't help the way the paper has changed. You know what I mean? He still covers all of Onslow County sports great, and I want to give a shout out to him because most times if I need something on the local scene, especially if it's not Jacksonville or not Southwest that I know as much, I call him and he knows what's up. So y'all want to give any other shout out? Anything?
I would mention Chris too. In fact, I wouldn't say his job is difficult as much as it is impossible.
Yeah.
Because people
The only one doing it now.
grew up as expecting certain things from their newspaper and journalism aren't going to get that anymore.
Yeah.
And that puts a lot of pressure on him. He's got to cover sports for the print edition in a different manner than what people are used to, and it's tough on him.
And people want it yesterday.
And
They don't like to wait till the Saturday morning to read the paper anymore. They want it now. You know what I mean? And he's trying to cover high schools here in Onslow County, so it's tough.
And like Eddie, we were a local newspaper, and a lot of it was our high school coverage and all that. And I say, one thing I think about most is all the many people we've worked with and the behind the scenes stuff that went into putting out a paper. And there was some
Characters.
It was characters. It was a great time. And I remember the people
Yeah.
as much as
that we
anything.
worked with.
Now, were you guys still around from the state championship Southwest had in 2000, that area? Were y'all still covering
I was
sports here?
I was out of
You were
sports. I was in the city.
you out of
yet, but I
sports, yeah.
remember
Were you at a different paper too?
I was in
weren't you?
Fayetteville
Yeah,
then.
by then, yeah.
Yeah.
So those state championship runs where whether you're talking about Coach Riggs down at Swansboro with their volleyball teams, or the North Side, with Tony Marshman just a few years ago, or Coach Padgett with Southwest, or Coach Durham at Jacksonville. State championships are special.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize how special they are until you've gone years without one. And those schools like you worked in Shelby, so you know what I'm talking about. Shelby or Reedsville, title towns that win it or expected to win it every couple of years. A lot of these other schools, if you get one, it might be the only one.
Yeah.
You know,
Everything has to fall in place. It has to go
Yeah, I
just
was
right.
gonna say,
It's one and done.
You get Phil. It hits that run of just a great collection of athletes in that time frame, and coaches as good as they can be.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're just held prisoner to that. I mean,
and sometimes you have a great team and something happens that, you know, like Greg Cooper, as we call him, getting hurt, or then the Southwest team in 2000 that was one of the best ever in this area, but run into a buzzsaw in High Point Central, a team that was just loaded with D1 talent, and you know, next thing you know, your golden season is turned to dross. You know what I mean?
in Jacksonville this past year in the Eastern Final, Jacksonville had a great season.
Oh yeah,
But they ran into a 71st team, which was just loaded.
And then the Cardinals go back in '94, and then whatever year it was with Coach Bo Williams. You know, those were special teams that just happened to come up against the wrong opponent or have, you know, a break go the wrong way. And that's why what you said is so special that everything has to fall into place. It's not just talent; you got to have a little luck.
Oh yeah.
And things. Now I remember the coach from Shelby back in that day when Southwest beat them in 2004. Not the coach, but one of their big boosters back then. I was talking with him online and had met up with him and everything at the game. And he said when Phil Padgett walked that team out in all black helmets, black jerseys, black pants, in single file, with no sound, just walking out on the field, he said, our guys were done. He said it was over. He said just that feel and so many coaches, and Coach Padgett was good at motivating and that intimidation factor. That's why he switched to black helmets years ago, because he got tired of being called pumpkin heads. You ever heard that expression years ago? When Southwest first started, they wore those engine primer orange helmets. We wore them when I played there, and they called us pumpkin heads.
I always heard that too when
He hated that.
Richlands versus Southwest. Richlands always referred to it.
Oh yeah, and that's a rivalry that for years, you know, it was leaning Southwest way. But you guys covered some of those games. It wasn't always the best team that won that game. There's several years where Richland should have won that in that series. And then sports is different. It's something that it's not always the best team that wins. It's not always the most talented team that wins. It's that combination of factors.
I tell you what made that one a good rivalry was the fact is the best rivalries isn't simply just the sport; it's the communities involved.
Yeah.
They're just a natural rivalry.
Oh yeah,
there. So,
there's some roads where you know your family goes to Southwest here, and then your next door neighbor is on the Richlands line, and the line is right there to where you know all your friends and neighbors are one or the other. Yeah. And it's a great healthy rivalry. Linwood Whaley is a good friend of mine, and we give each other grief back and forth. Earlier this year, it looked like the two teams weren't going to be able to play because of the scheduling worked out where Swansburg got bumped down to another classification or out of a different conference. And so Coach Bird and Coach Garvey worked hard together to get it where Southwest and Richlands can keep playing. And that healthy rivalry between the communities, you're exactly right. And, of course, Richlands on a 3-game win streak right now in that series.
Yeah.
That's, you know, after all those years, Coach Bird has got them rolling up there 3 years in a row. So it ought to be an interesting first game this year. You guys ever get the itch, miss covering some of those opening days and when the sports are starting? Or you've had all you wanted?
I guess because one of the things, again, I go back to the people, the athletes and the coaches worked with during that time. I always enjoyed that, and that part of it I do miss. But fighting the deadline,
Not
pressure,
the grind
not a
of
bit.
the
No,
daily
no.
work and
I'm glad that's
fighting
belongs to
deadlines
somebody
every day.
else.
No, I don't miss that. I
can understand that.
Robert's right. There's people that you got to meet and talk to that made it special.
And I've talked to Chris about this. He's dealing now with the same things y'all did. You had those coaches that were great about getting you the information you needed, stats, things like that. Then you got those that back then, I don't know how you did it. You couldn't just text them. You had to hope to catch them on a phone someday
You had
or
to
something.
catch them, when they were on a break. You can get them on the phone.
Yeah. Like now where you just send it instantly, you know.
No.
Well, man, I appreciate you guys being with us. It was a good walk down memory lane, and we really appreciate all the stuff you guys did. I've got a bunch of papers over the years in a file cabinet. One day I'm going to bring them out, and I'll get y'all back on here, and we'll kind of go over some of them. Some of those articles, man, were so in-depth. It's almost like you were reliving the game as you were going through it. It wasn't just the stat lines and things like that. So y'all did a great job back then, and very commendable what you guys did. Now, you left Jacksonville. Did you go to any other paper, or
No, I could say
you just went up to the next
sort
level
of
in the paper.
because in 2000s, the Kingston Burnett sort of joined in
The
terms.
Sun, the Journal, and the Daily News, wasn't it? Yeah.
And so actually I finished up working at Kinston on a weeknight. And I was on the city desk there, and what I was doing pretty much was putting out papers, and I'm done. 7:00. Hour.
That was it. Time to go. Now you finished, I guess, in Fayetteville. Is that
Yeah.
was your last gig?
Yeah.
All right. Same thing. You just got one day and you just knew it was time to.
Yeah, well, not really, because I was, with the internet had changed everything. and
Yeah.
So what was the last year you worked in the business?
2017 is when I retired.
I didn't realize you were still in that.
Yeah,
long.
same year.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we like probably in terms of the new.
Yeah, but I knew my job was on the chopping block
Yeah.
at that time, because they were having to cut staff because of the loss in revenue from advertising because of the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's sad to see what's happened
Started
to
to
the
go
daily
to the digital
newspaper
world,
business.
yeah.
But I mean, I was lucky enough that I was old enough to retire at that time.
Well, you're still in your mid-30s, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
in my mind.
He's on his second or third 30.
Hey, you're still shooting in the 80s, man. You had your round. You said you shot 80 something this week, right?
Yeah, my goal is to break my age, but I doubt I'll ever do it.
I'm right there. If I get to be 113, I'll break my age.
Yeah,
If I can still
I'm
play.
the same way.
Well, thank you guys for being with us, Robert Holland.
I enjoyed it.
Just you guys' names have been synonymous with it, over the years, and it's something that you got. Those, like I said, old pay. Eddie Southards, thank you guys for being with us.
enjoyed
All
it.
right. We're going to thank our sponsors before we go, and then we're out of here today. National Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram, Rock Creek Golf and Country Club, Jones LP Gas located in Verona, Golden Corral, Mr. Billy Sewell. Once again, congratulations this week to our community for getting that YMCA open. Hollywood.
Well, I think
I've got a photo or two. I think
I don't think it's
share.
open. I think they're breaking ground.
Breaking ground, yeah, but
Yesterday.
that's the opening ceremony.
Boy, that was
I
quick,
guess,
man.
yeah.
Broke ground. It's open. Yay!
Yeah, the only way they can do it that quick is to dig a hole and get a pond.
Let it rain.
Yeah, and we hadn't had enough rain here to do that. So
No.
congrats on the groundbreaking. Billy Sewell was, an integral part of getting that started. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it said fall of 2026 is hopefully when they're hoping to get her open. Also, I want to thank Fountain Management, Miss Sandra Fountain, Barnes Diamond Gallery, Bartley Insurance Services, Bill Mercer, Onslow County Motor Company, Ben Beasley and the gang, Humphrey Heating and Air Conditioning, Lane Associates Family Dentistry, Doctors Tommy and Kim Morgan, Jones Onslow EMC, your Touchstone Energy Cooperative, and Southern Touch Painting, Roger Carroll and the gang. Thank you to all of them for what they do for Sports Talk, and please support the sponsors that support Sports Talk. Also want to thank Helen's Kitchen and Billy Grissett. Those Billy Bowls were phenomenal, weren't they?
Yeah, there you
Yeah,
go.
good stuff. And our Hurricane Watch, powered by Downey's Heating and Air Conditioning, Jason Humphrey. Hopefully it'll be a better watch next week when we talk about it. And our Racing Report, powered by Onslow County Motor Company, Ben Beasley and the gang. Thank you for what they do. NASCAR will be at Bristol this weekend, old school track. And that's a wrap. We'll see you next week on Sports Talk.